The richest sibling trio quietly dominating Arkansas. That's exactly what we're getting into right now. All right, I want you to picture something. 3 siblings sitting in Arkansas, not Manhattan, not Beverly Hills, not some glass tower overlooking a skyline, Arkansas. And between the 3 of them, they have built something so deep into the daily life of this country that you have probably touched their operation at least once today, maybe before you even got your shoes on this morning. We are talking about Rob Walton, Jim Walton, and Alice Walton. Now, I can already hear some of you, oh, the Walmart people. Yeah, I know about them. And I appreciate the confidence. But respectfully, no, you do not. What most people know is the label on the outside of the box. What almost nobody knows is what is actually running inside it. The real decisions, the real threats they absorbed. The real reason every major enemy that came at this trio eventually walked away with nothing. This is not a story about a store. This is a story about 3 siblings who looked at what their father handed them, looked at each other, and made a quiet decision. Nobody is taking this from us. Then they spent 30 years making absolutely sure of it. And they did not do it for Wall Street. They did not do it for magazine covers. They did it for the millions of everyday Americans who had been counting on what the Waltons built long before these 3 were even in charge. That is the story. Let's get into it. Okay, the numbers. Because people hear Walton money, very rich, and nod along without actually letting the scale land properly. So let me help it land. Rob, Jim, and Alice Walton are worth combined somewhere around $400 to $450 billion. Take a second with that. Not the whole extended Walton family tree with 40 cousins splitting a pie. That is 3 people. 3 siblings from Bentonville, Arkansas, a town that, and I say this with complete affection, most Americans could not find on a map, even if you spotted them, the state and the first 2 letters. That number sits above the GDP of Norway, above Denmark, above dozens of countries with armies, parliaments, and centuries of accumulated national wealth. 3 people from the Ozarks have outpaced the economic output of entire nations, and none of them are out there being loud about it. Rob, the oldest, spent years as Walmart's board chairman. Calm, measured, spends weekends at car races. You would stand next to him at a deli counter and feel absolutely 0 alarm bells. Jim runs Arvest Bank, a financial network with over $20 billion in it, out of Arkansas, with complete indifference to being famous for it. No interviews, no profiles, just operating. And then there is Alice. Alice poured her energy into becoming one of the most aggressive art collectors in American history, then built a world-class museum in Bentonville and made it free for everyone. No ticket price, no membership, just walk in. When she announced that, the art world had feelings, strong ones. We will get to Alice properly in a bit. Her chapter is something else entirely. 3 very different people, 3 very different corners of the operation, one center of gravity that never shifts. While everyone watches Walmart, the trio has spread its reach across banking, real estate, agriculture, energy, and culture. Every arm connects back to the same 3 people in Arkansas. Here is where the story gets good, because the Walton trio did not inherit smooth sailing. They inherited a pressure test. Sam Walton died in April of 1992, and the second that happened, the clock started on the most dangerous chapter any family empire ever faces the handoff, because this is where it falls apart. Almost every time, founder dies, kids start pulling in different directions, lawyers get involved, stock gets dumped in pieces, and the whole thing unravels from the inside. It happens so often it is practically a genre at this point. Analysts were predicting exactly that for the Waltons. The estate taxes alone were staggering, one of the largest wealth transfers in American history, and serious financial voices were saying the family would have to dump massive Walmart stake just to cover the bill. That selling would hammer the stock. That the slow unraveling would begin. It did not begin. Because Sam had spent years building legal and financial protection around the empire specifically for this moment. Trusts, holding vehicles, interlocking ownership structures, a fortress constructed quietly in advance, designed to hold even when he was no longer there. Smart man. But here's the thing. No legal structure can guarantee three siblings actually choosing to stay on the same team. Rob took the board, Jim took the bank, Alice took the cultural direction. Nobody elbowed into someone else's lane. Three completely different personalities, and they chose, over and over, across 3 decades, to stay pointed in the same direction. That is what their enemies could never find a way around. You cannot split something that refuses to crack. Now, the enemy, Amazon. Jeff Bezos spent years convinced he was going to do to Walmart what Walmart had done to everyone else. And for a stretch, you could understand the confidence. Amazon came in with Prime, 2-day shipping, the full narrative that physical retail was a format the future was leaving behind. Smart people believed it. Business press was running pieces that were essentially Walmart obituaries with a publication date attached. Real years where Walmart's stock sat flat and the word dinosaur was being thrown around by people who got paid to have opinions. Here's what Amazon never figured out about the Walton Trio. They do not make decisions based on whatever the current story is. While Amazon was celebrating and journalists were writing the ending, the trio was authorizing one of the largest operational rebuilds in retail history. They bought Jet.com for $3.3 billion, rebuilt the supply chain, turned 4,700 American store locations into a same-day delivery network that Amazon, for all its warehouses and logistics technology, simply could not copy because Amazon did not have a store already sitting 10 minutes from your house. Then Walmart started offering same-day grocery delivery from those actual stores, not a warehouse an hour away. The Walmart your family has shopped at for 20 years, now bringing groceries to your door. For everyday Americans, seniors on fixed incomes, families stretching a paycheck, people loyal to Walmart long before loyalty programs existed, this was not a tech upgrade. This was someone saying, "We see you, we are not going anywhere, and we are going to keep making this work for you." No new app, no subscription fee, no algorithm quietly swapping your usual brand for something with a better margin. Just the store that has always been there, staying there. Every other physical retailer that tried to hold ground against Amazon either shrank, got absorbed, or quietly disappeared. Walmart is still standing, more trusted by the people who need it than before Amazon ever took its first swing. Jeff Bezos built a rocket ship. The Walton Trio built something the rocket could not land on. Let me tell you about the piece of this operation that almost never comes up, and it is one of the most important parts of the whole picture. Jim Walton, Harvest Bank. Most people's image of Walton wealth stops at Walmart. Stores, parking lots, low prices, done. What that image misses is that Jim has spent decades building one of the most consequential regional banking networks in the South Central United States. Specifically, in communities the big national banks flew over on their way. To more profitable markets, over 270 locations. Arkansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Kansas, $20+ billion in assets, 0 Super Bowl commercials, 0 celebrity partnerships, just banking steady, unglamorous, community-level banking in towns that Chase and Bank of America had collectively decided were not worth the attention. Jim decided they were worth every bit of it. When you are the bank holding someone's mortgage, when you said yes to a small business owner that 3 other banks turned away, you are not just a financial service. You are part of how that community functions. That trust does not come from a marketing campaign. It comes from showing up when the bigger players did not. When 2008 arrived and major banks were melting down and sending representatives to Washington to explain themselves, Arvest did not need a bailout. Because Jim runs it without chasing flashy short-term deals, without performing for quarterly analysts, with complete focus on not breaking the thing he is responsible for. The big banks chased deals that looked impressive in a presentation. Jim chased communities that needed someone to stay. 30 years later, Those communities remember who stayed. Alice. Here's the setup. Alice Walton, one of the wealthiest women alive, steps away from the retail side, spends years becoming one of the most aggressive art collectors in American history, then announces she is building a world-class art museum in Bentonville, Arkansas. Free admission. The established art world did not take this calmly. Major institutions in New York, Chicago, the Smithsonian real tension over Alice pulling significant works toward Arkansas. Paintings by Norman Rockwell, Georgia O'Keeffe, Winslow Homer, pieces the coastal art world considered theirs by cultural right, heading to the Ozarks. Some people thought she had lost the thread entirely. She had not lost anything. She was playing a game nobody else had noticed was happening. The Walton name had spent decades absorbing criticism, wage debates, questions about impact on local businesses, building cultural narrative that framed Walmart as corporate America working against regular people. Real criticism, raised by real people. You cannot counter that with a better press release. You cannot argue your way out with an earnings report. Alice did not argue. She built something. Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art. Free to every single person who walks through the door. Open to people who had never been inside an art museum, who had never been told that kind of beauty was available to them, who had spent their lives being marketed to rather than genuinely given something. Today, it draws over 700,000 visitors annually. The town around it has been transformed. Restaurants, hotels, trails, a cultural identity that did not exist before she built it. The people of Northwest Arkansas are not tolerating that museum. They are proud of it. It is theirs. That is not a tax strategy. That is one of the most patient, most meaningful moves in this entire story, done not to impress anyone in a boardroom, but to give something real to people who deserved it. Here's the mechanism that holds everything together. The Walton family collectively owns between 47 and 50% of Walmart's outstanding shares. In a company of Walmart's size, that concentration is almost without precedent. Most companies dilute over time. Founders retire, heirs cash out. The controlling family ends up with a ceremonial board seat and not much actual power. The Waltons held. Walton Enterprises LLC keeps the family's stake consolidated under the trio's collective control, a private holding company with no public disclosure requirements and no exposure to short-term market pressure. When major decisions come up at Walmart, the trio is not one of the influential voices in the room. They are the room. No activist investor can outmaneuver them. No outside faction can force anything they do not want. And here's why that matters to regular Americans, not just as a business fact, but as something people actually feel. When a company does not have to answer to Wall Street on every single move, when the people running it have freedom to choose the customer over the margin sometimes, to hold prices down when it would be easy to raise them, it shows up in the experience. People feel it, even when they cannot name what they are feeling. The ownership lock is not just a power structure. It is the reason Walmart can keep making decisions that work for the people who depend on it, rather than just the people who profit from it. Here's something that almost never shows up in articles about the Waltons, and it might be the most underrated decision the trio ever made. They stayed in Arkansas with a combined fortune that could put them literally anywhere: London, Monaco, a private island with a runway. Rob, Jim, and Alice remained in Northwest Arkansas, Bentonville, same corner of the country where Sam Walton opened his first store. The financial logic is real: no state capital gains tax, lower operating costs, favorable regulatory environment. Those things matter. But there is something beyond the financial logic that matters more. The people who are deeply loyal to Walmart live in places that look like Bentonville. They are not chasing trends. They want honest prices, familiar aisles, and a store that respects that their budget has limits. When you live among those people, when you understand what a $10 difference on a grocery bill actually means to a household running carefully, you carry that into every decision. You do not need a focus group to tell you what matters. You already know, because it is your neighbor's reality. The trio never went coastal. Walmart never lost the thread of who it was actually there to serve. That is not sentiment. That is the most valuable market intelligence in existence, and it cannot be bought, hired, or outsourced. I want to be straight here because this part deserves the most attention. There is a version of this story focused entirely on criticism, wage debates, effect on small-town main streets, labor conversations that ran for decades. Those criticisms are real. Some landed and deserve to, not waving any of that away. But here is what gets buried underneath all of it. For millions of Americans on fixed incomes, for seniors watching every dollar, for working families getting through a month on a tight budget, Walmart has been one of the very few constants in their economic life that actually worked in their favor. In the sense of, I can afford decent groceries this week. My kid has school supplies. I got a winter coat without wrecking everything else. That is what the trio protected. Through Wall Street pressure to raise prices, through supply chain chaos, through inflation cycles that gave every competitor an easy excuse to pass costs straight to the customer. They held the line. They raised wages before being forced to. They invested in the communities their stores sit in. Alice built something free and beautiful for people who had spent their whole lives being told that kind of thing was not for them. Jim kept banking alive in towns the big institutions had written off. 3 siblings from Arkansas who could have squeezed every dollar out of what they inherited, instead kept asking a different question: what does this mean for the people who actually need it? That question is the part of this story that does not get told nearly enough. The next generation of Waltons is already coming into view. Grandchildren of Sam, stepping into foundation roles, learning the weight of what they will eventually carry. The generational transition every empire faces is on the horizon. And what Rob, Jim, and Alice can point to their most lasting contribution is that what they built does not depend on any one of them being in the room anymore. The ownership structure holds on its own. The community roots run too deep to be disrupted by a bad quarter. The museum Alice built is not going anywhere. Jim's banking network is woven into the daily financial lives of hundreds of thousands of people across 4 states. They did not just hold what Sam gave them. They reinforced every wall, dug the moat deeper, and made sure the thing could stand without them. And through every move, every long-term bet, every decision to protect the customer instead of just the margin, they kept faith with the people who had always been the actual point of the whole operation. The everyday Americans who needed prices they could count on. The small-town families who needed a bank that would not abandon them. The people who had never been handed anything beautiful and free and were told for too long that such things were not meant for them. 3 siblings from Bentonville made sure they were